Right, welcome to We Are Ivy Week 8. We have been talking under the bigger topic of how do we do people development rather than just program development. And as we've said, it doesn't mean programs are bad or anything like that. It just simply means we need to be sure what the leading question is. Are we here to build and prop up and grow programs, or are we here to build and prop up and grow people? Well, I'm sure all of us would say the same thing. We're here to make disciples, help people, and to facilitate spiritual growth for all of us. And programs do have a place in that, but oftentimes what happens in churches is that once programs have been around for a while, we tend to get that order reversed, and we tend to think that people exist to make the program a success. And we hear ourselves talk about this all the time, like this church program has been a wonderful success. Maybe what we should be talking about is that person is having a great spiritual experience or moment of transformation in their life. So we're really trying to focus on spiritual and personal development, and creating the resources and the culture and the environment and the encouragement and the training that goes along with developing people. So to continue that conversation, today we'll just mention several other things. The first one is thinking about how we shape people rather than how we provide a script to people. So let's just take the movie industry for a moment. Actors and actresses in a movie will have a certain role to play, and they are speaking and acting off a script. It's all been thought out, it's all been laid out, everybody knows what the plot is, the lines have been predetermined, the actions have been predetermined, and their job, the actors and actresses, is to perform the script. So they do what they do, but things can sometimes go off the rail when they get off script. And sometimes, I don't know, maybe a producer has to cut and say, no, we need to get this thing back on script, you forgot your lines, or this wasn't the way that we were going to shoot this scene, or we are going to rescript or write a different script for how we are doing that. Well, churches sometimes do the same thing. We have over time kind of written, whether it's in a formal document or whether it's just informally in the culture, or in the way churches do things, we have kind of written our scripts. In other words, these are the things that we're going to do. This is the way we are going to do it. This is a process that we will use. And once there is a script, then the goal is to try to get as many people as possible to buy into that script, or to conform to that script, or to live out that script. And we all understand, that there certainly is value in doing that. We have a common script. We have a scripture, but that is different than scripting people's lives. Let's think about the possibility of, rather than kind of scripting everything that happens and seeking to get as much conformity as we can, let's think about shaping as many people's lives as we can. I mean, that's what discipleship is all about. Um, it is about how people are shaped. All of us are designed differently. We all have different passions. We all have different gifts. We are all at different places in life or different seasons in life. And in that sense, we all need to be shaped differently. There's no one script per se that applies to us all. For example, it would be impossible for me to take my daily script, what I do every day, and impose that on you and say, this is my script, this is what I do, this is where I go, this is how I spend my time, this is how I invest, this is what I prepare, this is what I do, and all those things. But that's not your script. And so just think how awkward it would be and how unusual it would be for any one of us to make our particular script, whether it's mine or yours, to make that the standard for everybody else. Your script is a script that you have probably discovered works best for your life. And for you to impose that on somebody else would probably have a negative impact on them. But in churches, we have a tendency to want to script things and get everybody to come to the same script. Well, let's get everybody to the same scripture. But let's do what Jesus did with this thing. Let's allow and bless the different and various people styles that we have and personalities and callings and giftings that are among us. And let's invest ourselves in how do we shape us individually. Now, of the two, scripting people's lives or shaping people's lives, scripting is much easier. That's why it is, primarily become the default position for most churches. It's just a lot easier to script it all out and say this is how it's going to be, and everybody get in line or walk in step with this. But when we shape people's lives, it's a lot more messy. It takes more investment of energy and time, and we allow space for the many differences that we all have. And in shaping us, shaping individuals, ultimately that shape takes more of the shape of Jesus, and that's where the true unity of a church is found. Oftentimes we have thought that if we can just get everybody to do the same thing, say the same thing, go to the same event, or whatever, that produces church unity. It might put us all at the same place at the same time, but that does not in itself guarantee or come close to guaranteeing that we have church unity. Church unity is a shaping process. People are growing and moving and being shaped into the very image of Christ. And as each one of us are being shaped in that direction, the unity is not something that is forced upon us from the outside. It is something that we begin to share together and we begin to experience together from the inside. To illustrate, I could easily enough conduct a wedding ceremony, perform a service, and in that wedding ceremony declare that this man and this woman have been united together in the bonds of holy matrimony. Well, we're all standing there The words have been said. The law has been kept. They are now legally married. But the words from the outside of me declaring that they are now husband and wife does not mean they're going to be united. They are united as their lives, their hearts, their souls begin to understand each other and begin to live into each other. And as a Christian couple or a Christian marriage or followers of Christ, our unity comes not by a decree or a declaration or even being at the same time, at the same place, doing the same thing. Our unity comes from us being shaped on the inside together into the image of Christ. The shaping process requires something that is challenging for a lot of us, especially people like me, where I do a fair amount of teaching in various venues, and then have preaching responsibilities and speaking engagements. In all of those particular settings, I am doing the talking, and others are there presumably listening. Well, what's hard for churches to do is to value the role of listening. You know that listening is a lot harder than it sounds like it would be. If you're in any relationship, you know that there are times in which you probably have been accused of, you didn't hear me or you really weren't listening to me. One of the best things that church families can do is to learn how to better listen to each other, to create the opportunities and create the space to actively and with engagement listen to what other people are saying. And this whole thing about helping people move in the direction of Christ and shaping people oftentimes comes down to whether we are really listening to people, or are we just, when people come, are they just funneled into one setting and somebody's talking to them, and then they are funneled into another setting and someone else is talking to them? And it so happens that they might spend a couple or several hours at the church and no one has listened to them. Various people, teachers, preachers, others, have been talking to them. And maybe we just, I know I certainly do, maybe we need to be more intentional in how we listen to people and let them know that they are being heard and they are being listened to. So, one of the things that we'll be talking about is how do we help shape people? What does it take to do that? And we'll try to check ourselves on when we are in a mode of basically scripting people to do what we want them to do or what serves the church. Maybe the question should be reversed. How can we serve people? How can the church do the serving part? Another part of this whole conversation about developing people is discerning the difference between participating in something and maturing in something. Again, it's a lot easier to count participation. So there's no problem saying, for example, we had, X amount of people in Bible study, and we had X amount of people in church, and we had a certain amount of people who were part of the youth program, or a number of kids who were in Sunday school or in a nursery. Those are typical and reasonable and fair statistics and ways to know how we're doing or how the church is doing. But none of those in and of themselves measure how a person is growing spiritually. So regardless of the number that are in a worship service or in a Bible study class or in a Sunday school class or in a children's program or youth program, that number in itself is not an indicator of spiritual growth. Now, it's tempting for churches to say, oh, but over the last year, our attendance has grown 10% or 20%, and so we're growing. Well, attendance performance can move upward 10, 20, 30%. Even that does not or is not a genuine measure of whether or not there is spiritual growth itself. So we need to, along with looking at where people are participating, we need to probably think in terms of what is the question that really needs to drive that. How are people growing? Can we see evidence that people are becoming more like Christ? Can we see evidence that because of Christ's presence in a home, the home is better, or a marriage is better, relationships with kids? Or can we see that in somebody's life, because they're maturing in Christ, their witness at work or at school, or their sense of fulfillment, or their sense of value as a son or a daughter of God is making an impact in their life? And are they reading the Bible and feel like they're encountering God and praying and having experience with God in that? So those things are very, very difficult, obviously, to measure, but those are the things that matter. So along with the things that measure, maybe we could cast it this way: how do we talk about the things that matter? And so I'll look forward to us having some discussion about that. Also want you to think about our delivery system and how we need to debrief. Now, this kind of goes along with what we've been saying. Delivery system is when, for example, I deliver a sermon, a teacher delivers a Sunday school lesson, or in whatever ways we might deliver some religious good. However, when we are just delivering stuff, for example, when I'm just delivering a sermon, there's more to life than just being able at the end for me to say, okay, I have prepared all week long, I have been praying, I've been discerning, I've been seeking to listen to God and shape this sermon throughout the week, and Sunday has come and now it's delivered, and then I can check that box. Or you could say, well, I have got up, got ready, I went to church, and I was in a worship service, and so you can do the same thing maybe that I do, and you can say, okay, check that box. I was in worship today. Well, when we just measure things by delivering them and assuming that after we have delivered them, then the job is done, then we're going to fall short on our discipleship. If you order something from Amazon and it's delivered to your doorstep, the delivery might be done when it shows up at your house, but whatever it is you've ordered has hardly yet had a chance to do whatever you're going to do with it. Sometimes churches think in terms of delivering worship services or delivering a lesson or delivering something in the context of a program or a meeting. However, just because the delivery is made does not mean that we have actually really unpacked and discipled. Delivery is just a part of that. So one of the things that we'll be talking more fully about is debriefing. Like in all of these, Jesus is the model. Can you picture Jesus walking along his disciples? They go to a town. Jesus talks to some people. He might heal some people. He might go to dinner, and his disciples are gauging all of that, and they're with him for most of those things. And then in the evening, can you imagine Jesus taking his disciples and gathering them around and actually debriefing, talking about what happened during the day? What did you see? What did you think I was doing? How did God show up? And those had to be wonderful, beautiful moments. Imagine a church doing the same thing. We just don't deliver stuff, we debrief. In other words, we give people opportunities to say, this is what I heard God saying. This is what I see God doing. This is how I hear God. Or maybe this is, I don't see God, and I'm struggling right now to hear God. And we all have seasons like that. And when we debrief, we are allowing our responses to be part of the process. And so let's create ways that we can help people debrief maybe their worship experience, or maybe their Bible study experience, or maybe their fellowship experience. How do we help people debrief so they can articulate and they can express what they have seen God doing? And some of that means, how do we help people have better conversations? It's really hard to have multiple conversations during a sermon. It might be hard to have multiple conversations going on during a Bible study time. So how do we help create spaces where people can have space dedicated to spiritual conversations and help them to grow into conversations that really matter in people's lives? And then finally, for today's conversation, I just want to talk about teaching and behavior. And again, all of this flows out of the same conversation. Just because we might teach a lesson or preach a sermon does not necessarily mean that behavior has been changed. What churches usually are focused on is getting the information out. Here's the information about the Bible. Here's the information about this text. Here's the information about this lesson. Here's the information contained in this sermon. And so we're often information driven. And again, we think we're done when we have delivered the information in this Bible study, sermon, or whatever we're doing. But the reality is that information must translate into some behavioral difference that happens in our life. Maybe it's just an attitude. Maybe it's making different decisions. Maybe it's the way we think. Maybe it's things that we do. All of those things, very behavioral oriented. And sometimes in churches, we need to realize how much information we are putting out, and which is good, certainly needs to be done. But we also need to think perhaps more about how do we help that information, how do we help people take that information and it become more of a behavior or changes and transforms our behavior in. some way. So, I thank you for taking a few moments to join me today. We will continue this conversation next time. So, trust you have a great day, and we'll look forward to the time we can just sit around in this office together and be able to have these conversations. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next time.